because Kathy reminded me. Okay. All right. So, hello, William. William's here. Very cool. All right. We are on page 35. If you have the hardcover book. If you have a Kindle, Jerry. And Jerry's only going to be with us for 10 more minutes, so enjoy her while you can. We're right at holding a creative tension, Jerry. So if you can find that. We read actually these couple paragraphs, but I thought it would be a good place to start. And so we got some continuity. And before we do start, is there anything that anybody wants to bring up from last week? Anything that was not completely fulfilled to your satisfaction that you've been thinking about? Becky's been thinking about. Sometimes you think about things, Becky, and I hear about it later. So, yeah, if you're still processing, nothing you're processing, good. All right, just checking.
Health days that I went back and reread. Remember I had mentioned so I went back and reread, like, I don't know, a good 20 pages, and it was good. So I was looking to see if I had highlighted anything, and I don't see anything, so I think I'm good.
All right, okay. Well then let's dig in, see how far we can get and how much trouble we can get into. Holding a creative tension, page 35. Mature people invariably thank their harder parent, law-driven church, kick-ass coach, and most demanding professors, but usually years later. This is a clear sign of having transcended and included. It is what we should expect 50 to 70-year-olds to say, and what you seldom hear from 20 to 40-year-olds anymore, unless they have grown up quickly. Some, of course, have also been wounded quite lethally, as in situations of rape or abuse or bullying, and it takes them a longer time to heal and grow. I just thought it would be a good moment here just to see, do you have anybody in your life like that? Do you have a law-driven church or a harder parent or a kick-ass coach or a professor that was tough, that you look back on now and maybe at the time didn't appreciate or bristled under, but now you look back and are grateful? Do you have someone like that in your life? Tony says no. Okay, Tony is not transcended or included yet.
That's right. I'm still following upward.
Right. But Becky, you said yes?
Yeah, actually, both my parents. They were quite strict growing up, which I hated. But years ago, I went back to both of them to thank them because they kept me safe. And I was a bit of a spitfire, especially through high school.
No.
So that probably surprises you. So I needed it, and they were good. But you know, I was the kid that had a curfew and had to be in by 10, and my dad made any date just miserable. They never showed up more than once because he was so tough on them. But William's laughing. But you know, he was also smart because the guys I was bringing home to date probably weren't the best guys either. So no, I'm very grateful to my parents for that kind of strictness.
Mm-hmm.
No one
Any
else?
other examples?
No one else had?
No other examples, really? Brady.
Well, for me, and I get tired of saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. For me, it was Al-Anon and my first sponsor. I did not have good parents, and my father died when I was 25, and my mom was, let's just say, anyway, not a good leader. So it wasn't for me, and I didn't really get it in school, even though I was an A student. I can't think of a single teacher that really made a difference. So for me, it was when I got in Al-Anon, and the women in Al-Anon and my sponsors in Al-Anon were the ones that mentored me and helped me the most. And when I first got in Unity Church, the pastor and his wife, I kind of took them on as my spiritual leaders. And that was a big stepping, but that was many years after. So it wasn't my parents, but I did fortunately have groups, let's say, and women in groups and spiritual leaders that helped me. So that's what happened for me.
Can't hear you, Dave.
Were those leaders either in Al-Anon or whatever? Nobody's tough in the Unity Church. Come on, Jerry. But in Al-Anon,
They were tough.
were they
But
tough? And did you resent the toughness then and now come to realize that you needed it?
my sponsors were tough. They were
Okay.
very tough. I had a couple of sponsors who were very tough, that, really called me on my stuff. No, I guess the spiritual leaders weren't necessarily tough, but they did make me think. They did make me question, because I would question. I would often question and say, so that helped. But I wouldn't say they were tough, but they did help me. So, but
Okay.
my sponsors were tough. They were
And those first sponsors, how long ago was that?
Well, I've had a sponsor the whole time I've been in. I've had 1, 2, 3 sponsors. The sponsor I have now is not quite as tough.
No, but the first one, the tough one, how long ago was that in your?
Oh, that was 30 years ago.
And how long did it take for you to then start to appreciate the toughness?
Oh, well, she made me go through the 12 steps again, and she made me do it the AA way, which pissed me off because I said, I'm not it's their problem, not my problem. But once I got through the 12 steps, and I would say after I did my first 4th step with her and did my 5th step with her.
Then you started to see the wisdom.
Then I started to see,
What kind of time frame was that? How many years?
That was about a year. We spent about a year doing the 12 steps.
Okay, well, you came around it pretty quickly then. But you were at a different point in your life too.
Yeah, I was in a different point, and I'd already had a previous sponsor who wasn't that tough. She
Okay.
wasn't tough. So I kind of coasted probably the first 4 years, I would say,
Mhm.
until I got Sue. And then Sue she was really tough. I mean, if I would whine, she'd have no part of it.
Okay.
So I stayed about a year with her, and then I kept her for a long time until I moved to California.
All right. Becky, how long did it take you to start appreciating your parents before you went back and thanked them or whatever?
That's a great question. I went away to college. And so for me, and I married really young. So I married at 19. So I think I was introduced to life kind of in a big way very early. And so pretty soon after that, like probably when I was 20, 21, I knew that part of the reason I was making it was because of all the guidelines and really guardrails that my parents had, I incorporated because they'd set them down for me. So it really young for me. And just being away from home, oh man, did I miss all those luxuries? I had to work, and I worked through high school too, but it was different in college. And so young.
You guys are just too enlightened.
Oh, please. No.
Yeah.
I mean,
you figured that out so quickly. I can remember for instance, the novice master when I went to the religious order, who was so tough. And I just fought him at every single level, up one side and down the other. And now 10 years later, when I was trying to get a teaching job in the Catholic school system, he wrote a letter of recommendation for me, which was kind of amazing because, all I did was give him heartburn the whole time I was there. But it took a good, 10 years before I saw what he was doing, what he was trying to do, and why he was trying to do it. it actually, he convinced me while I was there to stop fighting him. I remember him sitting down and said, I can't let you win, because if you win, I lose all these other guys. And I got that. And so I stopped fighting. But I really didn't see the value in it until much later. And so, yeah, it took me a while to figure that out. Brady, did you have someone? Were you going to say something?
I had a few, but the one that really counted was in college. I had, in high school, I just slid. I mean, just never really applied myself, never worked. So in college, I flunked out after my first semester, then I flunked out after my second semester, then I flunked out my third semester. And in the middle of my fourth semester, the dean of students called me into the office and kicked me out. Wow. And it was 1967. I was 1A. It was going to be a bad deal. And so I can't say I immediately resented him or was angry at him. I was just scared to death. And saw him as a antagonist, because it was the first time someone ever had really kicked me in the ass. And so I don't think it took that long. I mean, I remember telling the story about him once I was in grad school, because things were going well and I was in grad school and I kind of learned some discipline and I was doing well. And I realized that but for that guy, I might not be there. So.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. Any other shining examples?
I had one. I had a female boss in early in my years, early in my career in HR, where I was kind of pretty junior, and I didn't really know what I was capable of or anything. And she really pushed me to take on these big projects and things, and I kept saying, I can't do this. This is not. I'm in over my head here. And she's like, nope, you're gonna do it. You can do it. And I was kind of ticked off at her a little bit. And I really would go home and grumble about her all the time. And I kind of look back now and I see she was really pushing me to do some things that I needed to do. And I had to get my own confidence. I mean, she was really kind of teaching me about my own confidence level, which was kind of cool. And we've stayed friends for a number of years now. And there was a time after that, I left the company, moved on. We kind of stayed in touch, but she had dealt with some depression and she had a couple of bad marriages. And it would have been just as easy to kind of just let her float away and not connect with her anymore. But I hung on to her and I thought, she's going through some really crappy times, but she was there for me. She really pushed me in my younger career. And I gave her a lot of kudos for that. So we're still friends, and she does some crazy things still now and then, but we've hung on together, and I've always appreciated what she's done. So she's a pusher.
There you go. Yeah. Well, I think you guys are getting the idea here. And the whole point that Rohr is making is that if we don't have the law in the first half of life in some way, shape, or form, if we don't have someone who's really pushing against the free form of our ego, there's no limitations, there's no restriction, then we're not going to be able to form that first half of life container in a way that's going to be a successful transition then into the second half of life. And he's going to be pushing that. This is what the creative tension is going to be all about here, is that tension between liberty and law, which is why I love James and the law of liberty that he talks about in the book of James, where he brings both of those together in that perfect creative tension, because it sounds like an oxymoron, the law of liberty, but it makes perfect sense once you understand where he's driving us. But this is the point that he's going to continue to make. So as we look at our past, and we can now be grateful for those who created such cognitive dissonance back in the day, and restricted us and angered us and all of that, and look back and be grateful, or as that old timer did at the first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting that I went to, and stood up and said he was grateful for being an alcoholic. And that didn't process at all with me. But for him, alcoholism was that tough taskmaster that forced him into a new definition of what life was going to be like. And so to be able to look back and be grateful is the transcendence and the inclusion of all the lower stages that we have experienced in life. And that's a real critical place to get. So moving on now, I'm trying to place you and then hold you inside of a very creative tension, if you will allow yourself to be held there. I do promise you it is a creative tension, because both law and freedom are necessary for spiritual growth, as Paul says in Romans and Galatians. He learned this from Jesus, who says 7 times in a row, the law says, but I say. I don't know where he gets 7 times in a row. I only count 6, and there's the 6 antitheses. So I'm not sure where that 7 times comes in Matthew 5, but at any rate, this is Jesus redefining the law. Bye, Jerry. See you soon, dear. But at any rate, this is Jesus finding that balance between the letter of the law that we need to hold to in order to be part of society, but to transcend that at the same time and realize that it's not just by holding the law that we are going to come into the real second half of life contact that Jesus is driving toward. So he learned this from Jesus, who says 7 times in a row, the law says, but I say, while also assuring that he has not come to throw out the law, but to bring it to completion. Despite having been directly taught to hold this creative tension, rare is the Christian believer who holds it well. We are usually on bended knee before laws or angrily reacting against them. Both are immature responses. You know, when I first read this line, I said, despite having been directly taught to hold this creative tension, exactly where in the church were you taught to be holding this creative tension? I mean, I wasn't taught that. Were you? I was taught to obey the law or else, basically, both in Catholicism and in evangelicalism. So, but here's the end. If you read the next line, actually, I've seen many Jews, Hindus, and Buddhists who do it much better, but very few Christians have been taught how to live both law and freedom at the same time. So, Richard, which is it now? Come on. You know, I don't know what he's doing here. You know, he says that we have been taught directly to hold this creative tension, but then he says very few Christians have been taught how to live both law and freedom at the same time. So I'm not exactly sure what he meant by the first one, but I agree with the second one more, because that's been my experience, and I don't know if it's been your experience too, that we were basically all on one side of the ledger as we were being brought up. And my Christian formation, included, basically learning how Catholicism worked and what time, when the feast days was, and when I was supposed to go to church and confession, and just follow it to the letter, and everything would be well. But I never got the balance of that. I never got the creative tension. Our Western dualistic minds do not process paradoxes very well. That's certainly true. Without a contemplative mind, we do not know how to hold creative tensions. We are better at rushing to judgment and demanding a complete resolution to things before we have learned what they have to teach us. This is not the way of wisdom, and it is the way that people operate in the first half of life. Now, that was a big topic in the Johnson book that we read, right? About owning the shadow and holding on to paradox and all of that sort of thing. And this is what he's talking about here. We want to flop down to one side or another, Republican or Democrat, Christian or Jew. We want to just go down on one side, plant our stake in the ground, and then that's true and everything else is false. That would be a dualistic approach. And that's the way I was taught as well. But contemplative practice and the contemplative mind takes us into that liminal space where we can stay in the doorway, let the paradox ride, and let it usher us through to a deeper understanding. But man, I sure wasn't taught that. Were any of you taught that in your spiritual formation? Yeah. All right. This is one of the failings of institutional religion, at least in my experience and many others. Primitive and native societies might well have held this tension better than we do today. There is much evidence that many traditional societies produced healthy psyches and ego structures by doing the first half of life very well even if they were not as developed or individuated as we are. I have seen this myself among indigenous and undeveloped peoples in India, the Philippines, and Latin America. They often seemed much less neurotic and anxious than we are, and can deal with failure or loss far, far more easily than we can. Any of you who have been in the barrios, favelas, and townships of the world know how often this is true. Owen Barfield says that they enjoy a kind of simple but transformative original participation with reality and with God. Do any of you have any experience with third world peoples? And have you seen what he's talking about? Yeah, Brady?
Yeah, went to Thailand years ago, and not so much the Thai people, but went up into the mountains to see a couple things, and came across several tribes who were growing opium up in the jungles, and just looking at the way they lived. We went into a hut, and there was a woman there on a bed smoking opium, and I asked how old she was, and the guy said, I think she's in her 30s. She looked like she was 70. I remember that very well. But the people themselves were, I really liked them because they were just all about relationship. They're incredibly welcoming. They wanted to know things about us. One guy, it was a elephant camp. And so part of the thing that happens in this community is young men are paired with elephants when the elephants are very young and when the men are still boys, and then they bond with the elephants. And so two of these young men wanted me to meet their elephants. And so it kind of reminds me of the kind of unification and identification with everything. Because everything around me was part of this experience, not just the people, but the huts and the way they lived and what they were doing, and the relationship with the elephants and the elephants themselves. So I had that.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think I've always been attracted to, like when I went to third world countries, like yeah, the last time I was down in Colombia and even parts of Costa Rica, like they're just, like in course, Costa Rica, their motto is pura vida, like pure life. And there's a simplicity that I find very attractive about how some of the people live, like, and I'm very much drawn to that in some ways, like the type of people who, kind of roll out a mat on the floor and sleep on that, and that kind of living. Yeah, I think there is something transformative about living that way, and the simplicity of it all.
And of course, I spent a lot of time in Mexico, working for the nonprofits and with the nonprofits, and then directing the nonprofits. And yeah, it was that same sense that these people who had so little, these people that we would look at and just feel pity for, and yet they put us to shame in terms of their ability to enjoy life and enjoy what they had, and not just the children, but the adults too. And that was amazing to me. It always amazed me when we would go down to Mexico, and one of the stated missions of Children in the Americas was not just to fill the bellies of the poor, but to warm the hearts of the rich. That was the way that we put it. So taking North Americans down, taking people from the United States down, and letting them see and absorb the culture and the people and see if it turned them on to become, lasting participants in the ministry or not, but to connect them up so that they would actually have an experience. And it was fascinating to me. Some people went down there and all they saw was the grinding poverty, and their hearts were broken, and they get so depressed and so heavy, they never wanted to go back. Other people would go down and they would see nothing but the joy of the children and the way that the people were able to transcend their circumstances. It was amazing to me that, different people had different glasses on, and they saw completely different things in the same circumstance, in the same neighborhood. And but there was that ability. What he says here, that people sometimes in these indigenous cultures seem much less neurotic and anxious than we are. I saw a lot of that. They can deal with failure or loss far more easily. I saw a lot of that too. Mm-hmm. And I think some of it was that these people were living a lot closer to the ground than we do. I mean, kind of like William said, you can roll out a mat and sleep on the floor. But they were also living with the cycles of life at a subsistence level. There was chickens and critters running around, and they were butchered and they were, prepared for dinner. I mean, they're living through that circle of life kind of thing. So they're living closer to the land, and they're living closer to death in many ways, which I think gave them a sense of a more real existence than we do, completely insulated and isolated.
Church last week either. I guess Dave was freaked out.
And so anyway, I know exactly what he's talking about here, and I've seen it, and I think it's a lesson for us to try to live life at a different pitch. It becomes a difference between gratitude and entitlement. That entitlement that we have, being part of one of the richer countries in the world, or the richest country in the world, and being grateful for what we do have. And so it's a huge difference, and one that we shouldn't miss. And if you've not been to a third world country, well, that's okay. You don't need to go there to understand the concepts that we're trying to get across here.
I had a similar kind of vibe. There were a couple of fishermen I met who, one of them actually lived on, it was a pretty small boat, but he would pull the boat up on the beach next to this restaurant area in the evening that had a shed that he can sleep under. And he would basically fish for the restaurant and for himself. So every time you went to the restaurant, it was like fresh fish that came in that day. And it was the kind of thing where, if nobody wanted to fish, there was no fish that day, But it was just like he was just living off the ocean, and basically everything else he needed was bartered with fish, essentially. And perfectly happy wife and kids, and it was just beautiful.
I can even say, William, just watching you over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it's been now, I don't know, William is the whole time that I've known him, William has lived in a motorhome and various motorhomes, and he's had this completely different lifestyle that has been so interesting for me to watch. And for a while, Alex, who pops into frame every once in a while, he was with them for several years, and they were living together in the bigger motorhome. And then Alex went back to the East Coast, and then he got a smaller one. And but he would just pull up and park at the beach, and that was his office and his front porch. And so in many ways, William, I look at you and I see you as kind of living in this space as well. I mean, I don't know how neurotic you feel, but you project a lower level of neuroticism than a lot of people I know.
Nice cover. All right.
Yeah.
He's a 9. He goes with the flow.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. So it's not serenity, it's avoidance, right, Kathy? Is that what you're trying to say?
It could be both. Let's not be dualistic now.
That's great. That's great. But I think you see the point that Rohr is trying to make here, that we in our developed country, We think that we're so sophisticated and so smart, and we've got all the psychobabble to go with it. And yet we're the ones who are running around stressed, anxious, depressed, and having to be heavily medicated and therapized and all this kind of stuff. And someone like William's talking about, he just goes out and he fishes. He keeps some for himself. He gives the rest to the restaurant, and he barters for what he needs. And he gets up the next day and does the same thing. And we would look down on that probably and say, you know, where's the ambition? Where's the production? You know, where's the benefit to larger society and all these things that we worry about. But, you know, who's got the better end of that stick? And not that we are going to go and, you know, live off the land or live off the ocean, but can we create a better balance? And that's what we're looking for here. So he continues, in the Western world, it seems we cannot build prisons fast enough or have enough recovery groups, therapists, or reparenting classes for all of the walking wounded in this very educated, religious, and sophisticated society, which has little respect for limitations and a huge sense of entitlement. How could this happen? How could neuroses and depression be less the exception and more the very norm? Our elderly are seldom elders, it seems to me. When they are true elders, we all fall in love with them. I think that's true. Do we fall in love with our elders when they're really elders? Seems like we're ignoring most of our elders, whether they're wise or not, which is really sad. But I like this line here. He says that our Western world has little respect for limitations and a huge sense of entitlement. What do you think he's talking about when he says little respect for limitations?
They want to be able to do everything they want to do.
Okay, yeah. We want to do everything we want to do when we want to do it.
You want it all now. You know, you
Mhm.
just don't want to wait or work for it hard. Just you want what you want.
Yeah.
I guess that thing about notion of wanting to be an individual, being kind of self-absorbed, and therefore not wanting anything to inhibit you from doing what you want to do or getting where you want to get.
37. Yeah, absolutely. Danielle typed that she wanted to know what page we're on. Actually, what's the meaning of life, the universe, and everything? 37. So I'm just giving you the answer. 37. Out of nowhere, you got it. Any rate, yeah, what Brady is saying, what Linda is saying, Kathy, you know, it's where are the limits placed on our, you know, kind of our egoic consciousness? You know, as children, we're perfect little narcissists, right? And if there isn't any limitation placed on that, where are our boundaries? How do we know where our rights end and the next person's rights begin? You know, how are we going to know any of this stuff? How are we going to be able to understand the limits of our container if there isn't something or someone pushing on them at some point? And yet in our highly individualized society and the society based on personal rights, there's less and less limitations being placed on us institutionally and in our families and personally. And so this is a problem. This is a problem because if we don't develop a good, healthy psyche and egoic container, then we're not going to be able to make the transition into the second half, where we're then trying to transcend it, but also include it at the same time. And so it's so important that we see the virtue in the things that probably make us bristle at the same time.
You know, it's nice to kind of see people transition. My nephew I raised, you know, he got in that high school stage and this guy was doing everything wrong to the max and drinking and stealing cars and crashing them. And I had to send him to rehab twice. And he was just kicking the walls. And, you know, I loved him the whole time and let him know that. But he called me a year ago. He's, you know, he's doing really well now. And he called me a year ago and he said, you know what? I'm glad that you got on my ass to try to do things right. He goes, I wouldn't be where I am today if you would not have done that. And, you know, it's like, you know, that's all a parent wants to hear, right? Because you go through the best and the worst with him. But he made that transition, you know, that I think we're talking about here. And gosh, it's just nice to see, you know, really nice to see.
See, that's so cool because there's Tony on the other side of the desk of what we were talking about at the beginning, right? We were talking about the people earlier in our life, and now here's Tony. He was that guy, you know. Is that Robin you're talking about, Tony?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
That's Robin.
So yeah, I've met Robin. I know Robin, and yeah. See, and that's the beauty of it. So how long did it take him? Was that about 10 years before he was able to make that call to you?
Yeah, and here's a kid that didn't want to finish high school, and he ended up getting his degree from UC Santa Barbara in entrepreneurship. And so he's pursuing that career in San Diego, and he's doing really well.
That's great. That is so great.
Yeah, who would have guessed? Who would have thunk?
So there's Daddy Tony being the limiter, being the evil person who's limiting Robin's rights as an individual and raining on his parade. And yet, when he gets to a certain place, he realizes the value in that. And that's where we all need to get, where we can see the value in it, even as we're breaking the rules for specific reasons. And because love demands it at times, but we know, at least know where those rules are, and we know why they're there. And we realize the limits of what we need to do in relationship. And just also important. And again, the dualistic mind wants to flop down to one side or another. Either it's all law and order or it's all love and puppies, you know, but how about the balance in the middle? We've got to hit that balance and realize that they both have their place, and it's not either or, it's going to be both and.
I was thinking back quickly to what William said before about, you know, traveling to these other places, the simplicity of life. And I mean, I don't know anyone who's done it personally. Well, I don't think, well, maybe this one person I was going to bring up, but that people go to India often to sort of get away from whatever to find themselves. And, you know, there's something about that place of maybe just total poverty where you live among whatever conditions you live to kind of figure out who you really are. And I don't know how successful that is, but I knew one woman, her daughter went and did some kind of mission program or something in India. And she was there for probably 6 months or a year. And she had a terrible time coming back to the US after that. She couldn't fathom all of the things around her that she had given up. And she had to like almost go through therapy just to kind of reacclimate and re-enter back into the US society of things and materialism and all of that. It was really hard on her and it was a struggle. So, I mean, you can kind of see it from both sides. Giving it up and then trying to come back into it is just as hard.
Yeah, very common with missionaries, we found, you know.
Is that true? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna be tough. Probably the longer you stay, the harder it is.
There have been studies that have shown that many alternatives and choices produce stress, produce anxiety. You know, just walk down the supermarket aisle. I mean, how many different choices of breakfast cereal are there, you know? And it's like, we don't realize that having all those choices and being asked to choose constantly, what's the best and what's the best thing to do? You know, how many people are telling us, you know, eggs are good, eggs are bad, coffee's good, coffee's bad, you know, all these things, you know, this is the best diet. No, this is the best diet. And all of that creates a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. You go out to some of these subsistence cultures and they're basically eating the same thing every day, you know, and they're grateful for it, you know, and you don't have to worry about what you're going to wear today because there's only one thing hanging in the closet. And guess what? There's no closet. So it's a really different thing. And so I can really understand what you're saying about this person coming back and then suddenly being hit with all this noise and all of this stuff. that would just seem so superfluous after you've been living with people on a subsistence basis.
I think it's definitely that, and, you know, all the noise and all the busyness. But, you know, I think what Kathy was kind of referring to and what William was talking about is when people go to these places, you know, you're aware of what's not there. You're aware of the poverty and the simplicity, but you're also aware of the fact that they are seeing something. They have found something that we have. Something that exists there that doesn't exist here. And these poor little kids pour out of the huts in the morning and they're all clean and happy and smiling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just them. The parents come out and they're smiling. Mm-hmm. They're content and they're very polite. They're curious. There's something that I think, and you think about the missionaries, you know, they find something there that when they return to this,
Mm-hmm.
miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like the way he words that last sentence in the paragraph, the original participation with reality and God. You know, like there's, you know, I've been thinking about something he said in a couple of pages back about God has no grandchildren, I think was the line. You know, it's like we have to learn about this relationship ourselves. And the more technologically advanced, the more, you know, we go outside and we see man-made structures and man-made technology and things of that nature. I think all of that can kind of create a greater sense of separation from the rawness of life and so on. And it doesn't mean that separation is real at all, but it's like it's easier to forget, you know.
Absolutely. You think about, we go from one air-conditioned container to another on rubber-soled shoes that keep us electrically from being grounded with the earth. And even when we die, we don't even give our bodies back to the earth. We put ourselves embalmed in steel caskets inside of concrete vaults and put that in the ground. You know, it's just like we live in these hermetically sealed lives. And it's not that what they have in these other countries and indigenous societies, we don't have here. I mean, obviously we do, but it comes back to Jesus saying, hey, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom. It is just so much harder for us to break through all of the stuff and all the choices and all the noise and all of the ensuing sense of entitlement that comes out of living the kind of lives that we live in this country and in many developed countries, not just the United States. So it's up to us then to be salmon and swim against that tide and to dig deep and to get to the place of awareness where we can see beneath that surface to what's really there. And that takes a lot of effort, a lot of work to do that.
That go, should that be through our whole life?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're always looking for the balance, but it does get easier with practice, like anything else we do, right? So if it feels like you're really pushing the rock up the hill at the beginning, it'll get easier as you go, but there's never a moment that we're not actively striking the balance if that's what we want. Because if we just relax, we're going to flop down to one side or the other and we're back into dualism again. But to stay in that unitive place, to stay in that balanced place takes constant balance, just like the tightrope walker with the pole, you know. Eventually they can walk across that cable as easily as we can walk across the room, but they're still balancing every second that they're up there. And it'll be the same with us. But it will get more into muscle memory.
Yeah, I'm baffled by, Kathy mentioned, the friend who went for 6 months in the undeveloped country and came back to the United States. And it's anxiety provoking. But I'm baffled, but if you led a simple life and you liked it and you come here, but I see it as, okay, these are all noise and clutter. One doesn't have to choose to live that way if it causes stress. Yeah. Like the point that she needed therapy, I that to me is baffling. Like, you don't have to choose to live a complicated life if you already saw both sides.
You know, the missionaries that I've spoken to, that they really had difficulty grappling with what they perceived as a shallowness of our culture, you know, and what we project as perceived needs, you know, because like we've been talking about, they've, you know, they haven't been around all the choices and all the things that we say that we need, you know, similarly eating similar meals every day and just really depending very little and focusing more on community and relationships and the here now of God and all that, and seeing God in such a broader, expansive sense. Whereas we go to church to connect with God, and we say we, you know, we've got, those are the distractions, I think, and the shallowness when I've talked to them that they're referring to, and that they don't want that for them. And yet it's so much to block out. You know, they could, yes, they could choose, and they do. You know, I have great friends who are a couple, and they're retired, and they live a very simple life and still eat the meals from, you know, the mission field, you know, all they keep it very, very simple, but they need to be out in nature. That's what nurtures them, is getting away from the city life and getting away from all the noise, so to speak.
Right.
So for them, it's I just remember talking, it's just the sense of shallowness of people who think that there's so much need and so much drive, you know, to get more and more and more, and forgetting what really matters, and not being able to see God in the very simplistic and in nature and in the very simple things in life, and focusing relationally and community. And
I can see that. I mean, it's like we get so accustomed to certain things, like that entitlement creeps up on you.
Yes.
You know, you find yourself getting upset at the waiter who didn't bring your bread fast enough, or, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
And just that vibe or that energy wouldn't exist in some of these other cultures, basically. So I like the way you explain that. That makes sense.
I think there's a lot of truth, Ellen, what you say. It makes sense to come back with a conscious mind and say, I really want things to be different. But I also remember this. She was a young woman in her 20s, and she came back to this family who just sort of expected her to fold back into life, and, oh, you're back. We're so happy you're back now. And so she just kind of was smothered with all of this, you know, materialistic world, and just to just jump back into that. They kind of just expected her to do that. And I think she had some anxieties, and she had a harder time acclimating to that. So pulling away was harder in some cases. And I can see what Daniel's saying. It's probably harder for a lot of them. You got to get away from all the noise. And it's hard to do that when everyone wants you to be around, or your family expects you to be around, and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's, you know, sounds good, but it's tough, I think.
Yeah, in that scenario, how do you love your family again? How are you a part of your family again? When you know, you've seen this other side to life, and you're coming back, and they're expecting you to step right back into the shoes that you left in and be that person that you were, and you're not that person anymore, you know? And that dissonance would be so difficult. And you'd feel like you're on the outside looking in, and it's your own family, you know, or the friends that you knew and the life that you left. So that I don't know. I think that's worth a session or two.
I just make a crazy plug for this funky movie, and it's a little bit bizarre, but I like it, and I watched it a couple times. It's called Captain Fantastic. I don't know if anyone has ever seen it, with Viggo Mortensen, and he and his wife take their like 5 children, and they live off the grid somewhere, probably up in Washington State in the forest or something. They kill the food that they eat. They're extremely well educated and all this. And then they are struck, we're having to go back into society because of a death in the family. And they have to go back to these very rich parents or in-laws. And it's a very interesting, twisted story about how they honor this person that passed away and how they acclimate, and all these children have to acclimate to this world that they never knew. They don't know what it's like to go in a Target store and shop and for stuff. They're used to killing the rabbit and saying a prayer and then cooking it for dinner and that kind of thing. But it's a very interesting story. It's well done. But if you're looking for some entertainment, did you see it? Somebody saw it?
I didn't, but I remember seeing the teaser for it, and I like Vigo, so I was thinking about it, and I just never got around to it.
It's a little abrasive. There's some language, and so it might be in the R-rated category, but for some, but it is well done, and he's quite good in it.
All right. Ellen, does that make more sense to you? Yeah.
Yeah, I just was baffling to me, like, you can choose to, I don't know, step away from it if you've seen, but if there's pressure for you to I don't know, expectations, I guess, from the family, and you don't want to disappoint them or yeah.
So once again, the point he's making is that some of these indigenous cultures and quote unquote undeveloped cultures do a much better job of the first half of life, of helping people within the culture to develop a healthy psyche, to develop a healthy egoic container, because the elements are there. There's nothing that limits you more than subsistence, right? I mean, let's face it. There's a hard break there. There's a hard limitation there. And that orders your society and orders your family life and orders your day and choices in a way that it's hard for us to comprehend. So, so that is all baked into the cake. But it's a good thing. We would look at it as being a horrible thing, a terrible thing, but it's producing people who are much healthier in many cases, all right? So again, this is the point that he keeps making. And let's see where we are. Let's just finish this last paragraph, and then we got a nice chapter break for next week. He says the presumption has been against law and authority for several centuries now. Tradition or any talk of limits has not been attractive since the protesting Reformation, the unenlightened Enlightenment, or the rise of democracy, all of which were necessary, by the way. Now we all start our kids in a kind of free fall and hope that by some good luck or insight, they will magically come to wisdom. The ego cannot be allowed to be totally in charge throughout our early years, or it takes over. Great line, huh? The ego cannot be allowed to be totally in charge throughout our early years, or it will take over. The entirely open field leaves us the victim of too many options, and the options themselves soon push us around and take control. Law and structure, as fallible as they often are, put up some kind of limits to our infantile grandiosity and prepare us for helpful relationships with the outer world, which has rights too. So he's working hard here to make his case. Doing a good job. Good job. He brings in that idea of the entirely open field leaves us the victim of too many options, and the options themselves soon push us around and take control. What we were talking about earlier, that the proliferation of choices and alternatives create anxiety for us. We all start our kids in a kind of free fall and hope that by some good luck or insight, they will magically come to wisdom. There's another good line there. If we haven't created the limitations for our kids, then we'll see the results of that in adolescence and early adulthood. I just watched Magnum Force. I don't know why. All of a sudden, I wanted to see the old Dirty Harry movies, and the first, and there's a catch line in every one of the 4 movies that or 5 movies, whatever he made. You know, the first one was, you know, do you feel lucky, punk? Well, do ya? Yeah. But the line for the second one was, a man's got to know his limitations.
Yes.
So we got to know our limitations. We got to have limitations. Well, we all have limitations, but we got to recognize them, and they need to be enforced, or we're going to have troubles later on.
I saw a great example of that years ago. I was with a friend, Jerry, and his daughter. She was maybe 5, and we took her for ice cream. And before we go over, Jerry says, Cammie, you can have any flavor you want, chocolate or vanilla. Any one. So we go, and before we got there, she decided she wanted chocolate. But in front of us, there was, this is like a 35 flavor place. In front of us, there was a guy with his little girl, and both of them were absolutely losing their mind. She was frustrated and angry and throwing a fit, and he didn't know how to handle it, and you could tell he's uncomfortable.
That's it. Chocolate or vanilla. Limit the choices. It just streamlines the process like you can't believe. You know? That's great.
Well, I have to say, that's why I buy Neapolitan for my girls.
3 choices in one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which end are you going to start at?
Yeah. Well, that has happened too. You know, the chocolate finishes first, and then
It always does.
like, yeah.
See, when I was a kid, I was always pushing for the strawberry. I always wanted the red. I didn't want the chocolate. I wanted the red and some of the white. You know? So I was still making choices within the Neapolitan choice, right? That's great. All right.
Vanilla.
Okay, so we'll pick up there next week, and I will miss you guys on Tuesday, but we'll pick up on the first half done poorly, page 38, and we'll pick up there on Wednesday. And we still don't have Scotty here. So is there anyone else other than William, who I put on the hot seat last night, who would like to close us in prayer? Any takers? Going once? All right.
God, thank you for community.
Yeah.
Thank you for connection. Thank you for Richard Rohr and all the insights that are being uncovered and the opportunities for us to connect through discussion. Thank you for your love, your big, humongous love, and your amazing grace that we get to bask in every single day. Thank you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Danielle. That was beautiful. Loved it.
Just kind of barged in there, didn't I?
That was great. Just go for it, especially when it's prayer.
Let's get her done.
Yeah, and you were so assertive. That was an assertive prayer. I loved it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Another good session tonight. We'll see you Sunday, hopefully, on the little screen if you're not in the room with us. And I love you, and see you Wednesday after that.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Becky.
Bye,
Bye, all.
Jordana.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. All right. See, okay, Sherry, are you there? Just checking in.
I'm here.
Hello.
Hi, I was just leaving.
You were just leaving?
I was just leaving. Yes, I'm sorry.
Well, it's
I'm
time
sorry
to
I was
leave.
late.
It's time to leave. Yeah, don't be late anymore. What's wrong with you?
I didn't mean to be. I got stuck.
Okay. All right. So hopefully we'll see you guys on, well, I won't see you, Jordana, on Sunday.
Yeah, not
And,
until
Linda
like.
and Sherry, I hope I'll see you too.
Okay, we'll see you then.
All right. Good night,
Bye,
everybody.
Linda. Bye, Dave.
Bye-bye.